All right, so the first thing I want to say is I hope that everyone and their houses and their families are all safe and okay after last night with all the rain and flooding and everything else. So if anything came up for you that you aren't able to, attend, so this goes out to people watching this video in the future. If you're not here right now and you missed class because of weather-related stuff, just let me know. I'm not going to take off. Other businessy type thing, I have gotten no indication yet that we are moving back to in-person. So next week we will still be doing this Zoom. As soon as I know, I will let you know. And again, the link's going to be the same as it has been so far. So any other business comments, questions, concerns? I finished the grading of the first homeworks and I will be sending them back, but spoiler alert, if you turned it in, you got a 100. I just wanted to make sure everyone gave me their emails and everything. So I have all of your information now and I will be sending everything back to you tomorrow. Any other business questions before I start off here? All right.
I'm just walking home due to train cancellation, so I'm on them.
Yeah, and that's amazing that you're here, so thank you. But yeah, if anybody else, if at any point your email or your Zoom kicks off, or you can't walk in class or anything like that, just feel free to step out. The Zoom or the YouTube recording will be up either later tonight or tomorrow. All right. So then the plan for today is basically just to pick up with where we left off last time. And our topic for today is arguments, premises, conclusions. And that's what the reading was about. And so basically this is all we're going to talk about today. However, I want to first put it into context, because oftentimes I found that philosophers and logic teachers have this bad habit of just throwing this word argument at you and then just like not explaining how it fits in or why we should care about it or how it even fits into our more general notion of critical thinking. So we're going to take what we started last time, just talking about what critical thinking is, specifically what thinking is, and then talk about how from thinking we get to this notion of an argument, and then why we spend so much time talking about arguments and everything related to them, like premises and conclusions. So to first start off, I want to bring up this word which we talked about last time, thinking. And we said that thinking was something that really had two key characteristics when we gave our definition. Does anyone remember what those two key characteristics of thinking were?
The process.
It was a process or an activity. So let me put up activity, or might be a little easier, activity, but activity / process. And then what was the other thing? Anyone remember?
Analysis.
So that was another way of describing the same bit. So that's 100% correct, but there was a second thing related to it. So what sets thinking apart from other activities, Lauren?
It's mental.
Mental, exactly. Mental. And so thinking is a mental process or mental activity. And I'm bringing this up because the fact that thinking is a type of mental activity means that thinking is a type of thing which allows for what we're going to be calling reasoning. And so thinking is a type, or reasoning is a type of thinking that is only possible because of the nature of it as a mental activity. And so what do I mean by this? Well, first off, activities or actions or processes. One of the consequences, or anything that's an action or a process, no matter how general, there are certain things that are true about it. And one of these is that it's, well, let me think of the best way of putting this. I'm going to throw this pen up in the air, or marker. It is a process or an activity. What are some things that are true of that? What are some things that you can say about this action?
It's conscious.
It's conscious, but let's go down an even more dumbed down basic level. When I do this, what is true about the very flying through the air of this little pen? Why is it happening?
Because your brain is telling your hand to move and your eyes are able to see it move in the air, therefore you're able to catch it.
Yeah, so it's I think to myself, I'm going to do this. Or another way of putting it is, I cause it to move. And here's the key thing about activities in general, is they can be caused by other things, and they cause other things to happen. So if I were to take this marker and next to this marker, and let's see if I can domino these. No, you can't really see them here. When I push this one, it knocks over the other one. And so this activity of it falling causes the other activity to fall. And so what this means is, just like that, thinking as a type of activity or a type of process is going to be able to cause other things to happen, and including other thoughts. So for instance, if I think about, tell me what the first thing to pop into your head is when I say the phrase vomit. What's the first thing you pops in your head?
Disgusting.
Disgusting. And the reason you thought of the phrase or concept disgusting is my saying vomit caused it to happen. So thinking is an action that causes other actions to happen. And so that's the first bit. Now, mental things are, thinking is a mental activity, not just a regular old activity. What is special about mental stuff, things that happen in the mind? What sets them apart from other types of actions or activities? And there's a lot of different answers here. I'm opening it up.
No one can see them?
eventually zoom in. Wait, Natalie, say that again.
No one can see it? Like,
No one can
no one-
see it. So that's one thing, is that no one sees it happening. It's something that is happening in your head. And yet there's also this thing where, even though no one sees it happening, there's this also weird thing where when I tell you to think about pink elephants, what are you thinking about?
Pink elephants.
Pink elephants. But are there pink elephants in your head?
Yeah.
Yes and no. Is there actually a pink elephant in there? Like if I were to take a
No,
chisel, no, there's not.
No.
There might be a pink elephant out in the world, and somehow then, even though your mind is in here, it's about things out there. So I'm going to say that mental things are, they have aboutness, which is just our very simplistic way of saying, when you have a mental thought, it's about, or any type of thought, a belief, anything, it's about things in the world. And this aboutness, or the fact that it can be about things in the world, they're about things in a way that can be true/false, or accurate/inaccurate. So what do I mean by this? You can have a thought about something which is clearly true. So for instance, it rained a lot last night. Your thought is about the fact it rained, and that's a true one. You can also, however, imagine things that didn't happen. You can also imagine that, say, last night you ate your neighbor for dinner. You went over there, you murdered them, you ate them. That is another thing you can think about. And yes, Lauren, that's the correct facial expression. But even though you didn't do this, you had a thought about it. You can think it. So this is what it means to be about. So when we combine these together, therefore, thinking is this activity or this process where each step in the process is about something in the world. And these individual thoughts about things are able to interact with each other. So when you had a thought about vomit, your thought about vomit then caused another thought about disgustingness. Or a thought about cannibalism causes a thought of disgust. All of these are cases in which thinking, combined a type of mental activity, is able to interact with other mental activities. And now why am I bringing this up? Well, because what reasoning is, which is going to be really what we're focused on all semester, and reasoning is just a type of thinking, and specifically a type of thinking that ties in with arguments. So what am I talking about here? What reasoning is, I'm going to erase this thinking, is reasoning is just the type of thinking in which you are attempting to gain new information about the world, or another way of putting this, true information that you didn't know before on the basis of things you knew already. So it's a matter of having thoughts with certain contents, causing you to have new thoughts that you've not had before, and for those new thoughts to be new pieces of information that are helpful and useful to you. So just to give an example, those of you who were supposed to have, well, how did you learn today? Subway equals bad. How did you learn that the subway was running terribly today?
On TikTok.
You learned on TikTok. So that's one way you could do it. What are some other ways people learned?
Because it was raining outside, so.
So another thing you could learn is just, that's actually a really useful one, tons of rain. Another way you could have learned is, did anyone not realize until they got to the subway and the train was a disaster? Or were all of you at least smart enough to plan ahead, unlike me?
No, I didn't know until I just.
Yeah, so that's another way, is you can learn just by straight up interacting with it. So the two main ways though you learn new things is, one, you interact with them directly, or two, you somehow think about them in a way. So for instance, a person who learned that the subway was probably running poorly because simply how much it rained last night, their train of thought probably went something like this. One, it's raining like, wow, this is incomprehensibly written. It's raining like crazy. And then after they thought this, they probably thought to themselves, whenever it rains like crazy, the subway gets effed up. Therefore, they came to the conclusion, or they decided, therefore, probably subway is messed up. So this is a straightforward way in which somebody takes two things they already know. They have a thought, it's raining like crazy right now, and whenever it rains like crazy, the subway gets effed up. Therefore, they were able to conclude, therefore the subway is probably messed up, and then you can look online to double check, or you could just generally avoid the subway. So this right here is a regular sort of thinking, and this is what reasoning is. You have one thought and another thought that together cause a third thought that allows you to learn something new. That's all reasoning is. And why are we bringing this up right now in this arguments, premises, and conclusions? Well, when you lay out a description of reasoning in this step-by-step way, this layout, it's basically a recipe for how you thought or how a person could think. This right here is what we in philosophy or in outside of screaming at each other context mean by an argument. This right here of just a description of the steps your mind takes to gain new information on the basis of old information, that description is an argument. When somebody is talking about that's a good argument or that's a bad argument, what they're saying is the structure behind the process of thinking you used is a good one or is a bad one. So does that make sense to everyone of what this idea of an argument is? It's just a way of describing a particular type of thinking, specifically the thinking that is designed to gain new information on the basis of old information. Even Natalie's use of TikTok to learn that the subways weren't working is a type of, you can describe it in this sort of reasoning way or treat it as an argument. And you can say, one, Natalie saw on TikTok that the subway wasn't running right. Two, people on TikTok generally don't set up gigantic fake subway floods simply to trick people and get more followers. Therefore, it's probably the case that the subway's not running right. So this type of everyday thinking just is what we're talking about when we talk about arguments. And in the book, when it's talking about like an argument is premises and conclusions, all it is it's saying a description of how a person would go about gaining new information about the world or justifying some belief they have or anything like that. Does this make sense to everyone? Just how this kind of fits in with our everyday notion. And
Yes.
Again, it's a different type of argument than, you yelling at your mom because she won't make you what you want for dinner. That's a different type of argument. We all good? All right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Perfect. Okay. So that's that stuff. Now, in an argument, there are these two parts, the premises and the conclusion. And the way you can think of these is what the premise is it's the part of your thinking that you start with. So it's the things you already know or the things you've seen yourself. And the conclusion is the new information you gain by way of your train of thought. So in this case, it's raining like crazy, or it rained like crazy last night. That is something you learned by seeing. And you're using that along with the fact that whenever it rains like crazy, the subway gets effed up to reach a new piece of information. So this right here, probably the subway's messed up or the subway is messed up. That is the new conclusion you're reaching. So whenever you see someone in this class or in any other philosophy class, or really in anything, talking about their conclusion, what they mean is it's the piece of information that they have gained or reasoned to on the basis of their other pieces of information. And the premises are the things they start with. It's the things that they already know that they're almost being used as the ingredients to gain new information. So does all of that, that's just what the terms mean. So in this case, this is the conclusion, this is the premise 1, and this is premise 2. These are just the steps that lead up to the new piece of information. And we'll be talking more next class and the class after about how many steps are there and complex arguments and all of that. But the basic idea is just whenever you think and are trying to gain new information, you can write down the steps as if it was a recipe. And once the recipe is down, you can analyze the parts that you started with, which are the premises, and the new information you gain, which is the conclusion. And in some sense, this is just putting labels on something you do in your everyday lives, because all of you do this to get around in your everyday life, just to, the most basic things, what to eat for dinner, whether or not you have class. All of that is just reasoning that can be described in an argument form. All right.
I have a question.
Yes.
So the first is the premise, and then in the middle, it's the thought.
So
And
no, the way to think of it is the first and second, you have multiple premises in most cases. So these are both premises. This is premise 1, this is premise 2. And it's when you think of these things together, and we'll describe this more next class, they together lead you to the conclusion that the subway's probably messed up. So usually in an argument, there's going to be multiple premises that together lead to a conclusion. And so what you're usually doing when you're thinking is you're kind of thinking of it as taking parts from different parts of your mind and smushing them together and then getting a new piece of information you couldn't have gotten unless you smushed them together. All right. So I just want to clear up one thing before we jump in a little bit more with premises and conclusions, which is why do we bother talking about the arguments behind our thinking or behind our reasoning? And then the other things I want to discuss is what makes arguments different from, or like those types of thinking that aren't reasoning and therefore don't involve arguments. So first off, why do we talk about things in terms of arguments? Well, as I said last class, one of our ultimate goals is to think better, think more clearly. And so in this case, if our goal is to gain new true information about the world, like nobody wants to believe the wrong things, especially if that's going to get them in trouble. So you don't want to believe that class is canceled on a day you actually have class. But also when the subway's messed up, you want to know that the subway's messed up. You don't want to be mistaken about that. And one of the best ways to ensure that you reach new information that's good is to make sure that the way you reason to get there is a good way of doing it. So for instance, we know that just looking at this intuitively or common sense, it makes sense that if it's always the case that the subway gets messed up when it's raining, and it's raining right now, you somehow know, like in your gut, okay, this is a good conclusion to draw, or it's safe to conclude the subway is going to be messed up. If, however, you go about your reasoning in a less ideal way, you might reach bad conclusions. So the reason we're talking about what arguments are is because this is going to be the first step in our discussions of how to reason better and some of the strategies you can use and some of the formats. Because the fact is, you can tell just by looking at the structure of many lines of reasoning, or the argument that is that line of describing that line of reasoning. You can just look at that and tell whether this is a good way of reaching a conclusion, and therefore whether the conclusion you reach is good or not. Because very often we will come to believe things that seem reasonable. So for instance, it seemed reasonable to a lot of people that the recent election was rigged. However, if you looked at what steps they took to get there and actually analyzed how they got there, it might not look like the conclusion was actually a good one to reach. So that's what we're really working towards, is the first step in learning how to reason better is to understand what reasoning looks like and what arguments are, so that we can then look at particular arguments and see why they're good or why they're bad. And now, one of the key steps in recognizing what's good reasoning or what a good argument looks like is to recognize that not every bit of thinking is reasoning, and not every string of sentences written down describes an argument or is an argument. So for instance, if I say that reasoning is the type of thinking in which you take stuff you know and you use it to draw new conclusions or get new information that you didn't know before, what are some other types of thinking that do not count as reasoning? It can be a particular example, or it can be like a general description.
Can anxiety be one? Like
Anxiety, exactly. If you're just having anxious thoughts that are running through your head, like, oh my God, I have to go do this, and then I have to do that, and then I have to do this. That's not reasoning. You're not working towards some conclusion. You're just having thoughts flash through your mind. That's a very good one. Any others that people can think of?
could it be when you're like under specific emotion, where like if you're angry or sad, you still think?
Sorry, Natalie, you're cutting out.
Sorry. Could it be when you're experiencing, like going through a specific emotion, like either anger or sadness, and you just don't think clearly?
Absolutely. So basically, any time in which it's just happening. So daydreaming, just being angry, a case in which you're just kind of, like reminiscing, like thinking back on a time. All of these are cases you're not gaining any new information. You're just playing around with the information that's already in there or experiencing it. Now, all these same things can then play a role or become a part of an argument. So for instance, you can think back and think like, my first birthday party was, you can't remember your first birthday party. My 11th birthday party was really, really fun. And from there concluding, my parents must have really loved me. Like, that is using the same thing to reach a conclusion. But if you're just reminiscing, or like, your friends are talking about the crazy stuff they did last night, and all they're doing is just describing the events of their night, that's not reasoning, that's just describing. So any case in which you're just describing something, reminiscing, just feeling, none of that is reasoning. Reasoning is when you're gaining new information from old. In the same way, if you just describe the thoughts that are in your head in a step-by-step manner, that is also not reasoning. So if I just describe to you, like, today I woke up, then I brushed my teeth, then I ate a bowl of cereal, then I went to the store, that is not an argument. And even if we wrote it down, 1, 2, 3, 4, not an argument, because I'm not trying to convince you or give you new information. Or if somebody were saying this out loud, or somebody who had this line of thinking, they wouldn't be trying to gain new information. All they'd be doing is just describing something that's happened in the past. So this is something to keep in mind, is just because things are written in a list or a line of sentences doesn't mean it's an argument. And just because you're thinking doesn't mean that it's reasoning. Reasoning is a special type of thinking about learning new truths on the basis of old truths, or learning new information based on information you already know. So does that distinction make a little more, like, is that okay with people? All right. So, so the first step in what we're going to be doing, I guess we're going to talk about it today, and then the homework's going to be about it, is I want to talk about and practice how you turn you come across a passage for the first time. How do you recognize whether or not that passage is an argument? And this is important because once you know things are arguments, you can begin to learn what makes a good one and a bad one. But if you can't pick an argument out of a hat, or you can't tell the difference between an argument and an aardvark, you're not going to be able to identify what's a good argument and what's a bad argument. So what I want to talk about now is just how can you identify whether a string of sentences presented to you is an argument? And the tough thing is there's no hard and fast rule. There's no simple way of making sure that something is an argument or not. The best way to do it is just to generally describe it and then look at some examples and see if we can figure out and explain to ourselves why something is or is not an argument. So the best way to think of it is just ask yourself the following question. If like a string of sentences is presented to you, if a person thought in this way, would they count as having gained new information by using info they already had. So this is just one way of putting it. Another way of putting it is, if somebody said these sentences out loud, would they be trying to convince me to believe something new on the basis of things I already believe? That's basically how to tell whether a series of sentences is or is not an argument. So for instance, if I just gave you a grocery list, like green beans, carrots, chicken. This isn't a case of you this wouldn't count as an argument. And you look at this and you go, yeah, this isn't a case of someone trying to get me to believe something. This is just a list of things to buy at the grocery store. So does that make sense? Of the way you tell whether something's an argument is you just look at a string of sentences and you try to see if somebody was saying this, were they trying to convince me of a new piece of information on the basis of that? Or if somebody thought in this way, would they be gaining new information? And to make this a little clearer, I'm going to share my screen. And what I'm about to show you is, where is my mouse? There it is. Where are you? Share screen. All right, can everybody see this shared screen? It should say part 1, 8 points, etc. So this is basically the homework assignment that I assigned last semester. And so your homework assignment for this upcoming week is going to be basically the same format. It's just going to be different questions. So I just want to go over this so that we can practice looking at what arguments are and what aren't arguments. So remember, you ask yourself the question, if somebody were to be describing, or if someone said this out loud, would they be trying to convince me to believe a new piece of information on the basis of things I already believe? So let's start with number 1. If you lose your sense of smell, then you probably have COVID. You lost your sense of smell, therefore you probably have COVID. Would you think that this is an argument? Is this a case in which someone is trying to convince you of something you don't already know based on on things you do know already?
Yes.
I would say yes.
Yep, you're all spot on. This is a nice, clear case of an argument. This is a case in which here's something you don't know, that you probably have COVID. You do know that you lost your sense of smell, and this person is informing you of the science. So now you've come to the conclusion that yes, I probably do have COVID. All right, let's go to another one. The number 6. The President of the United States has control over America's nuclear weapons. Nuclear weapons are the most powerful objects in the world. Therefore, the President of the United States is the most powerful person in America. Is this an argument?
Not really.
Yeah.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
if we say yes, what is this person, what new information would they be trying to get you to believe, or something that you're not necessarily, or if somebody thought in this way, what new piece of information would they have gotten that they didn't have before?
It's why French was important. I don't know. I think.
No, you're spot on. So the idea here is that basically the first 2 sentences here are giving reasons to believe that the President of the United States is the most powerful person in the world. So this is a case in which somebody would be trying to gain some new information. You can imagine someone being like, who do you think the most powerful person in America is? And someone said, well, the president has the nuclear weapons. The nuclear weapons are really powerful. Therefore, the president's the most powerful person. Or you can imagine somebody saying, well, Jeff Bezos has the most money, and money is power. Therefore, Jeff Bezos is the most powerful person in America. So all of these are ways in which you can imagine someone thinking through this. And this would be getting new information that they didn't have before. All right, how about number 3? I threw up last night. It was unpleasant. Is this an argument?
No.
No.
No, it is not. This is just a description of what happened to me last night. What about number 4? I don't cook, I don't clean, but let me tell you how I got this ring.
No.
Is this an argument? No.
Yeah.
So there's a hidden argument behind it, which is related, but by itself, these are just some statements. It's Cardi B describing facts about herself first, and then the follow-up sentence is her just saying, it's almost like a start to a story. But let me tell you, but by itself, it is not an argument. Number 8, every year the best baseball team wins the World Series. The Yankees have won more World Series than any other baseball team. Therefore, the Yankees are the best franchise. Is this an argument?
Yes, it is.
Yes,
Yes.
definitely an argument. And also, like, this is an argument that could lead to the other type of argument in which people from Boston and people from New York fight in a bar. So that's what it means to do an argument. And so the homework that you're going to have, the first step is just going to be looking at short passages like this and identify, is this an argument? Is this trying to get me to believe something I might not have believed before? Or is this just describing something or telling me a feeling or anything like that? So that's the first part of the argument. And anytime you come across a passage ever in your life, the first thing you should try to do is figure out, like, what is the point of this? Are they just describing something, or are they trying to convince me to believe something new? And so if you find out that, like, are they trying to convince me of something, then you can start asking yourself, are they doing a good job of it? Should I believe this thing? And the first step, once you figured out it's an argument, is you have to identify what the thing they're trying to prove is, what the conclusion is, and then what are the premises or the things you accept already that are designed to get you to accept that conclusion. So the idea would be, let me just go with this. Let me put an example up here of something that is an argument. So dogs are better than cats. No, let's see. Dogs are cuddlier than cats. Cuddlier animals are better. So dogs are better than cats. So this is an argument. It is an argument in which it is trying to get you to believe a piece of information you might not have had before. You can just look at this and see, yes, the person talking about this is arguing about something. And the question then is, how do you find there's going to be a conclusion, and then the premises are going to be the things that allow you to reach that conclusion. And so the ways to try to find out what the conclusion is there's a couple different like tools you can use. So I'm going to hop over here and just write them down, and then we can work through them. So two, three, four is key terms, therefore. So in conclusion. All right. So whenever you have identified that something is an argument and that there's something it's arguing for, the thing you want to do first is identify the conclusion. And the reason that's important is because once you know what the conclusion is, it can be easier to find out what the premises are. So there are a few different steps to doing this. Generally speaking, the conclusion is going to be that part of the passage in which whoever wrote it, or if somebody were to say this, is the one in which they're taking up a position, something that they are arguing for. So in this case, if we have sentence 1, 2, and 3, which of these is the one in which the person writing is taking up a strong position on something? The sort of thing that they're probably willing to fight about.
The first one, so dogs are cuddlier than cats.
So this is actually, I think I gave a bad one. I guess that is something people could fight about. So I may have given a bad example, but so let's do it this way. Which of these are not taking a position? I guess all of them are kind of taking up a position.
Is taking a position the third one?
So it looks like this is definitely taking a position, and this is definitely taking a position. So one of the things this actually illustrates nicely is that it's not always super easy to identify right off the bat what the conclusion of something is. So it looks like, in a sense, using this, and this is why this is a term we'll come back to later, a heuristic. A heuristic is just like a rule of thumb that works a lot of the time, but not always. So if we use this heuristic and we say takes a position, it's less clear than it would be in another case. So imagine another argument in which somebody says like, I don't know, to take an extreme position to make it clear, not my views, but imagine somebody arguing like, the Bible says that marriage is just between a man and a woman. Those two people are both men, therefore they shouldn't get married. It looks like those cases, there's only one of those that's really a position. The first one, like the Bible, there are passages in the Bible that say that. The second one, it is true that if two people are both men, they're both men. But there is a position in there, namely they shouldn't get married. So that's a clearer case of it taking a position. This one is a little less clear. But another thing you could then ask, so the first one in this case wasn't that helpful. The second one is a little more helpful, which is, which of these is most controversial?
The last one, because it's
Yeah, the
just
last
saying
one I think.
dogs are greater than cats.
Yeah, I think this is the one that's most controversial. Like, I guess some people might argue and there might be some controversy about the first one. There can be some pretty cuddly cats. I feel like though dogs are in general more cuddly, but this one, what's better, dogs or cats? People fight about this. I mean, I feel like half the internet is devoted to like, what are better, cute dog videos or cute cat videos? So if you have like that is controversial. So they suggest to you, all right, the person who's thinking about this, the thing they're trying to prove, the new piece of information they want me to believe, the conclusion, this seems the most controversial, so this is probably the conclusion. Then another way is you look and say, all right, it's probably the first or the last. And so this isn't ever going to get you down to one answer, but it can be very helpful for narrowing it down. So usually speaking, the conclusion is not going to be in the middle of what you're saying. It's confusing if you put it in the middle. It makes a lot more sense structurally because, as I said, an argument is supposed to be like a train of thought. It's supposed to capture how you think. Usually the way we think is we either first say the topic of what we're thinking about, and then describe how we got there, or we describe a line of reasoning we might take and eventually the new piece of information we know. So in this case, this is our last one, and then this is our first one. And then the fourth way we can do this is looking for key terms. So key terms, and this is often the clearest way. If there's a key term, it's almost guaranteed to be the conclusion. So phrases like therefore, or so, or in conclusion. And why I say these are giveaways is because the nature of these words in English, and every language has words like this, is to signal that this piece of information is being drawn from these other ones. So it's because of this and this together that I know dogs are better than cats, or that you should believe dogs are better than cats. So anything like a therefore, a so, and in conclusion, these considerations together prove that. There are many different ways you can do it, but whenever you're looking at an argument written down, key terms are a very good way of describing whether or not it's a conclusion or not, or whether it's one of the premises. All right, so let me pull up these actually, let me pause for a second. Are there any questions? I'm going, I don't know if I'm going too fast or too slow with this. It's always tough to tell because it's one of these things where, like, in some sense, this is so obvious because this is how you think your whole life. But on the other hand, because you do it so often, it's very hard, very often the last person to understand why you're thinking a certain way is yourself, because you're so close you can't even see it. All right, let me then, if there's no questions, I'm going to share my screen once again, and we're just going to do look at these exact same fake homework questions and talk about which of these are premises and which are conclusions. So let's look at the first one again. We said one is an argument. If you lose your sense of smell, then you probably have COVID. You lost your sense of smell, therefore you probably have COVID. Which of these sentences, the one that starts with if, the one that starts with you, or the one that starts with therefore, is the conclusion?
Therefore.
Therefore, yeah, the one that starts with therefore. And what gives it away? Well, one is that it starts with therefore. That's a pretty clear sign. Another is that it's the last. Finally, it is the most controversial of the three in a certain sense, because whether or not you've lost your sense of smell isn't really up for debate. You either did lose it or you didn't lose it. And the first one, that if you lose your sense of smell, then you probably have COVID. It's one of the most common ways to lose your sense of smell these days. Any other questions on that first one? Okay, then let's look at number 6 again. So let's pick one that doesn't have they all have, most of them have therefores, which makes it a little easy. 2 doesn't have a therefore. Let's do number 2. The French were crucial to American victory in the Revolutionary War. Gunpowder was vital to American success, and without French imports, the American army would not have had enough gunpowder. So the first thing I want to point out here with this one is it's possible for premises to, for there to be multiple premises within a single sentence. And we'll talk much more about this next class, but just to highlight that sometimes, like, a compound sentence with an and in the middle can be really 2 separate thoughts stuck together, and each separate thought is its own premise. So in this case, that's a clue as to what the conclusion and what the premises are. But that's something I wanted to highlight. So that, given that and reading this over, what is the conclusion of this phrase, or this 2 sentences?
Isn't the first sentence here is the conclusion, and then the second one is the
You nailed it. Yep, the first one is the conclusion. And so it passes the first or last test. It is also the most controversial in a certain sense, because you can think of some very strong patriots, people with very strong American patriotism who might not want to admit that the French played a very large role in the American Revolution. There's no doubt, though, that gunpowder was crucial. Like, that is just a statement of fact. You can't win a war in a gunpowder era without gunpowder. And it's also a matter of fact that most of the American gunpowder was imported from France. So those are just statements of fact. The controversial thing is the first one. It's also a position that someone could take up. Like somebody can argue. You can imagine if in like your US history class in high school, the teacher makes you do a debate about who was most responsible for the American Revolution or something like that. So that's another one. Number 6, let's just do this one. We've got the President of the United States has control over America's nuclear weapons. Nuclear weapons are the most powerful, blah, blah, blah. Therefore, the president is the most powerful person. What's the conclusion of this one?
The therefore.
Yeah, the
president.
therefore sentence again. Yeah, always keep your eye out for the therefores. Now, one last thing I want to say on this is, so number 7, first off, is 7 an argument?
No.
No, it is not. It's just a description of something that happened. You have a fat cat, it ate a rat, and now there's blood everywhere. When there's not an argument, there's no premise and no conclusion. So you do not have to, it makes no sense to ask what's the conclusion of this statement. It's just a fact. So let me stop the share. That's what your homework is going to be. And again, this is the first step on learning to reason more clearly and practice doing these things over the course of the semester. But I'm going to be posting the homework tomorrow, and it's just going to be the same sort of thing. It's going to be different sentences because I'm not going to give you the exact same sentences we just went over. But the first step will be just looking at it and seeing, is this an argument? If no, then you write no, not an argument. And if it is an argument, you write yes, it's an argument. Here's the premises, here's the conclusion. And it's also, it'll be graded partial credit-y, where like if you answer it, you get some credit. If you get it right about conclusion or premises, or if you get it right as to whether it's an argument, you get some credit. And then if you get the premises and conclusion right, you also get it. Great question. When is it due? The homework, so trivia time, when is our next class?
On the 9th.
Next Thursday. So the homework is due next Thursday at 8 a.m. And that's because our next class is not until Thursday, because Tuesday's Rosh Hashanah. So I will not see you next Tuesday, which means that you will have a week to get this homework done. And again, it's Thursday at 8 a.m. If you need to reach out to me with any questions on the homework, it can be about a particular answer. It can be about the whole damn thing. Just feel free to reach out to me. I will be happy to email. If you want to set up a Zoom meeting or anything like that, also happy to meet with you. Kyriakos, do you have a question?
Oh, no, sorry about that. I was just...
Oh, no worries. I just didn't know if, so my setup, I see everyone's screen. So like, this is how it looks. And even when I'm in the classroom, it's got like everybody's face. So because of that, I can very easily tell who's turned off their mute. So sometimes I'll be a little overly quick because I don't want to miss anyone. But if at any point you ever accidentally unmute and I call on you, don't expect to have to answer anything. It's just like I'm trying to be overly polite. Any last questions on this stuff? Hopefully it made some sense. Again, it's one of those things that it's so common sense is one of those things that is very easy until you actually start trying to unpack it. So if you've got any questions about anything before next Thursday, reach out. Otherwise, I will see you next Thursday. And again, next Thursday, we are going to be on Zoom still. Hopefully next week, the paperwork goes through. So again, if those of you who have not filled out your vaccination information on CUNY yet, the sooner you do that, the sooner we can get back to in person. Otherwise, until then, I will just see you next Thursday. If you celebrate Rosh Hashanah, have a great Rosh Hashanah. If you celebrate Labor Day, which I guess is everybody, have a great Labor Day. And I'll see you on Thursday.
Thanks, Professor.
Thank you, Professor. Have a good night. Have a good weekend.
You too.
Thank you, Professor.
Absolutely.